international success. That's awesome. I'm totally going to put that on my resume. That sounds pretty great. Thank you very much. My name is Leah. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is April 6, 2008, and my home group is indeed the social distancing group. It's an all-women's AA meeting. We meet 7 days a week based here in Dallas, Texas, and we do have people from Bolivia and New Zealand and Canada, and we have someone from the UK now, and it's really turned into quite a exciting experience because we started, I think, March 17th of 2020. It was at the beginning of the lockdown, and one of my first thoughts was, I can't do this without AA. I think what I said to my husband was, I'm going to go crazy if I don't have a meeting. And so a group of women got together. And there are women in that meeting who have never set foot in a building for an AA meeting. They've never been, IRL for something. So I think that really speaks to the fact that this is a message that can be carried, the language of the heart can be carried in almost any format. Because I would never have guessed, when I came into AA, my home group was Cornerstone, which if any of y'all know, back in 2008, that was the place to be on Friday nights if you were sober. It was standing room only, and we had people coming to hear speakers, and there was just this great fellowship. And Cornerstone kind of, after it moved a whole 2 miles north, was too far away. So it kind of died a very sad, slow, painful death for many of us. And then the pandemic happened. So it's been exciting to find that fellowship again, because there's a guy from Cornerstone who used to say, if you don't think your home group is the best one in the world, you need to find another home group. Because there's just something about seeing the same people, and most of all, letting oneself be known. I've never been particularly good at that. That is some of my earliest memories involve soap operas and Susan Lucci. That my grandmother got me hooked on All My Children and General Hospital and One Life to Live. These were all Channel 8 here in Dallas. And I would record them when I went to school, and I remember wanting that, all of that. I wanted something that was really far from my life in North Dallas. I was born at Presbyterian Hospital, so I'd never intended to stay in Dallas, but I kind of ended up back here, and it turns out the city has really grown up a lot and is a wonderful place to be, and certainly has some really great AA. But that was not what I was looking for here as a child. Well, some of my earliest memories involve seeking alcohol. I hated being a child, hated it. Because being a child, I think, was about being powerless. I didn't like being told what to do, which I still don't like being told what to do, but I didn't like it then. But I didn't like the fact that people could make me do things and could do things to me. I thought that was really unfair. And if anything, I've always had a very strong internal judge of what's fair. And it hasn't served me very well in many capacities, because I walk around looking at what's fair and what's not fair in the world, in people, in the animal kingdom, everywhere. What's fair? But as a child, I just wanted glamour. I wanted to be grown up. I wanted to be different. I loved Barbies because Barbies reminded me of Susan Lucci. And I could sit, my dad built me this giant Barbie house and my mother wallpapered the walls. I was very much a wanted child. I'm the third, I'm the youngest. My brother and sister were both drug addicts. And Nancy Reagan would be proud of me. My takeaway message from all that wasn't stay away from substances. It was, just say no, just drink. Because, right, they're different, And I saw the people on TV glamorous with cigarettes and alcohol. And even as a little kid, I wanted that. And I remember, having a lot of fantasy in my life and doing play acting in my room where I would be all the parts. I would make up all these stories. I would go and draw, not really theater scenes, but my imaginary life. I was really into Play-Doh and clay, so I would sculpt out things that I wanted to be real. And basically, I lived in my head. Because my brother and sister were hell on wheels, my parents kicked them out. So I really had a very lonely childhood. they stuck me in private school, which was very nice, but it was a reaction. My dad figured that rock and roll in public schools were the major problems in my brother and sister's lives. And they're 6 and 9 years older than me, so I just didn't see them very much. They were gone. And going to private schools, if any of y'all know what that's like, I mean, you don't know your neighborhood friends because people at private schools live all over the place. And I went to what was then called Parish Day School. So it was kind of spread out all over North and East Dallas, and it was, but we weren't rich. So I also didn't really quite fit in there. It was just always this feeling of being very different and just wanting to not be me. That's pretty much been the huge story of my life is I'm not comfortable. I don't want to be me. This doesn't feel right. And so fantasy was my first escape. And it's been something that I've had to work in AA to have people remind me that life on life's terms means people, places, and situations as they are, not as I want them to be, and not as I think would be fair, and not as I think would be ideal, but just sort of as they are presented to me. So, I have a really strong memory of my first communion, which was my first experience with alcohol. And I remember biting the chalice and pulling down really hard because sweet white wine is perfect for children. It tasted really great, and I loved it. Some people, there's are we born alcoholic? Do we become alcoholic? Man, the second I got my hands on alcohol, I was like, this is it. I just got to find some cigarettes now. My sister was really into Duran Duran, and before she got kicked out, she had gone to one of their concerts. And, her claim to fame was that she threw her bra on stage with her phone number on it and somehow ended up at an after party and got a purple cigarette from one of the Duran Duran people, which I smoked. And that did not go over well with her or with my parents because I smoked it inside because I didn't know that you could smell cigarettes. So all of this is by 4th grade. So it's not really a surprise that I ended up in these, in the mind frame of just wanting alcohol, wanting to change how I felt all the time. I was kind of a good kid in a lot of ways. I very much was a rule follower. I was uncomfortable with what I'd seen in my family, and I didn't like the police. I didn't like the scariness. I didn't like the warrants. I didn't like, my parents ended up getting split up, and there was just all this chaos. And so I just thought, man, I just got to not get caught. Because my brother and sister were not good at what they did at all. And so I really thought I was kind of smarter than all of that. And so, in many ways drugs are not really a part of my story because I knew that if I just didn't do that, I wouldn't get caught. I wouldn't get in trouble. Everything would be fine. I would just drink. And but it would have been a lot easier at 13 to get my hands on that stuff than it was in Dallas in the 90s to get my hands on alcohol. They got really serious about this carding stuff. There used to be a place called Vicon Village, if any of y'all are of that generation, somewhere in the 80s and 90s. It was over, I want to say, in Garland, and it was about $60 or $70 to get a fake ID. And it looked really good on the front and really bad on the back. So you had to get a tight wallet where it was hard to pull the ID out. But, we were getting those fake IDs, and 1 out of 10 times it would work. You go to enough grocery stores, someone won't check your ID very well. And my first real drink was at 15, and it was Tall Boys with a friend, and I got a nickname from that very first night. It was immediate that the alcohol was there for me in a way that tells me now that I was just primed to be an alcoholic. And I would still be drinking today if alcohol had not ceased to work in my life. Because at the time I would have told you it fulfilled all of the things that I needed. It helped me feel like I belonged. It helped me feel like my life was something that I could be comfortable in. It helped my skin feel less tight. Somehow I just settled. It's that feeling when you come in somewhere comfortable and you just sit all the way down and you're like, ah. And that was what it did for me. And from that moment, that was really my singular thought process, was alcohol and cigarettes on the side, but alcohol. And, you know, I did fairly well in high school. My parents had me still at a Catholic school, or at a private school. And I went to a girls' Catholic school here in town. And it was fun. I had a good time. You know, it was hard to get my hands on booze. And so I was physically restrained from drinking as much as I wanted. I was physically restrained from smoking as much as I wanted. I was physically restrained from my other fun habit, you know, of Jeff and John and Dave and my other hobby, which was, you know, dating guys. And so it kind of kept me on the straight and narrow. And I knew, you know, in my family, education has always been really pushed. And my parents, they're very good people. You know, they both have really good hearts. And after doing the steps a number of times in here, I've noticed that my childhood keeps getting better. Like the more I think about it, I think because I've come to see that my parents showed up the best they could. I mean, they're two small town Oklahoma kids who essentially gave birth to barracudas here in Dallas. You know, they're like these sweet little bunny rabbits. I mean, they have stories about trying Mexican food for the first time in the late 60s when they had tamales in a can. I mean, they're very wholesome, innocent people. You know, I'm not one to call anyone an alcoholic. I will say that I really relate to my mom's drinking, and she was one of my best drinking buddies. Possibly because she bought boxed wine and wouldn't notice how fast it went. But there was some of that going on in my household, some chaos associated with a parent who drinks like that and who hides their drinking. I didn't really realize that until later because I couldn't figure out. It's hard to know as a child why adults act the way they do. You know, anything is normal if that's how you're brought up. It's like being in a fishbowl. You look around you, it's like, well, this is it. This is how everyone is. And I think it's only when I got older and actually started talking to other people, including my brother and sister, about their memories of things and thinking, oh, that's what the coffee mug was for with the ice cubes. Like, I thought it was coffee. So, but you know, I did graduate from high school, bottom half of the class, but that doesn't matter. I graduated. I got to wear at Ursuline, which is the school I went to. You wear this huge white gown, and they give you a huge white hat and a dozen red roses, and you have to go out and curtsy in front of everybody. And I remember thinking that was absolutely absurd because at that age, Susan Lucci was less my role model, and Gloria Steinem was more becoming, you know, the person I wanted to emulate. And so I think I bowed because I figured that was, you know, a little bit more in the direction I wanted to go. And I got a small scholarship to a school over in Shreveport. And at the time I would have told you, because I got into UT Austin, and I thought, oh, you know, I'm going to go to this school in Louisiana because it's small and I got a scholarship and, you know, I'm really going to get to express myself. And I mean, the truth is the drinking age was still 18 in Louisiana. Sometime in the 80s, Ronald Reagan gave the 50 states the choice: keep your federal highway funding, and you can raise your drinking age to 21, or lose your federal highway funding and you can leave your drinking age at 18. And 49 states chose federal highway funding. Louisiana chose drive-through daiquiri barns with a piece of Scotch tape on the top of the straw to make it closed container. So I loved it there. But you know, as soon as I got there, you know, within 1 week, I had my bar, I had my new best friend, I had my bartender that I figured out which one was the heaviest pour. Shortly thereafter, he started dating my new best friend, which was even better. And, you know, I was off to the races. I had arrived. I don't think many people say that about Shreveport, Louisiana. I had arrived. Unless you're like landing at Barksdale and you're part of the Air Force. But, I mean, I just drank. That's a lot of my story, my entire decade of my 20s. I just drank. There's nothing very, there's some stories in there, but ultimately, I just drank. And I smoked cigarettes and dated a lot of guys. But, somewhere in my mid-20s, because it's really easy when a person is young, at least when I was young, to be surrounded by people who drank like I drank, especially in a college environment. Binge drinking, very common, very common. I have a stepdaughter now, and she's going to college at UNT. It's still very common. Binge drinking, I guess it's not just alcoholics. But somewhere in my, early mid-20s, I noticed that a lot of these people that had been my party friends weren't doing that anymore. And they were starting to save it or slow down, or just things would change. And I genuinely thought something was going to change for me. I thought I was going to mature out of it. I thought I would meet the right person. I thought I'd get the right job. I ended up transferring to UT Austin once I was 21. And I did get a degree in journalism, which is, a great field if you're an alcoholic. Like, that's a very much a habit in many newsrooms that I was in. But I just started noticing that my drinking was maybe a little bit different. I started noticing that other people didn't seem to need the amount of warm-ups to go to someone's house to have warm-ups, to go to the bar, and the whole time, anytime I wasn't by myself, trying to hide how much I was drinking, because I could see that it started to make people uncomfortable. My level of drunkenness was making people uncomfortable. And, Susan Lucci knows how to put on a good show. I knew that this mattered. I'm also from Dallas. This matters. Show up at church, make your shoes shine, and be nice to everybody. And that was really a big part of presentation for me, was, do I look okay on the outside? Would people know this about me? And, the overall trajectory of my life, sort of started here, and, it kind of goes like this. And there were plateaus. When I was getting my degree at UT, I very much wanted that degree. I really wanted to graduate from college because I could see there were some problems. And I went through this heroic effort for about 2 semesters where I reeled it in to Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And it was like this, I just felt like I should be getting a standing ovation. So there was a period where the trajectory kind of looked like that, but then it just kind of kept going. And, I can see that now, having pulled back and looking at the overall direction of my life, that it just kind of kept getting worse. And I kept feeling more not okay. Like, my inner okayness wasn't there at all. My mental health was really in the crapper. The depression and the anxiety, there really wasn't a night where I didn't go to sleep and think, it's okay if I die. It's okay. My parents, I love my parents. And I never actively tried to do that because I thought that would really devastate them. It would have devastated them if I had died under any circumstances, but in active alcoholism, I thought the key was not to do it on purpose. I took all sorts of insane risks with my life, but, interestingly, I never got arrested. I find that amazing because driving drunk was like my hobby. But I moved to a place on Orem Street, which, if you know Dallas, is halfway between Lower Greenville and Lakewood Landing, because my brother had told me, he was like, do you have $10,000? And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, because when you get arrested for driving drunk, that's how much it's going to cost the first time. And it made a big impression on me because my brother who had the beeper, back when beepers were only for doctors and dealers, has a PhD now. He's so weird. He just stopped. I don't understand these people. And my husband's a normie. I don't understand any of these people. But, my brother had said that to me, and it made an impression. So I moved to where I would walk to get my alcohol. And, for the last couple years, I really didn't drive nearly as much. So I think that's one reason I didn't get I didn't get arrested. I wasn't much of one for bar fights. I tended to kind of back off that. And as many of you may remember, drinking is expensive in bars. So there's a reason, to this day, I carry a massive handbag. And I used to do that because I would fit, 12 beers or so in there. And you go to a bar, you buy one, you wait till no one's looking, you pour something. And I was a beer drinker all this time, it wasn't very economical and it wasn't very efficient. I did kind of have to finally switch to the stuff in the plastic bottle with the handle and the screw top, but that was just necessity. But one of my last memories before I got sober, because I never would have said I was an alcoholic. I think at some point around 30, I came up with the phrase problem drinker. That was as close as I could get. I'm a problem drinker. And I remember being in that apartment on Orem Street. And I had a couple cats. I had been fostering kittens, which they love empty beer boxes, so that was fun, little caps and boxes everywhere. But I remember I had a takeout Payway soup container, which is huge. That's got to be 32 ounces, but that's just the right size for a mixed drink. So I was, having my mixed drinks out of this container because honestly, I didn't want to have to get up very often. I was on the couch watching movies. At that point, that was my emotional connection capacity, was DVDs. So I would make these drinks and I would slug them. And I remember late one night thinking, oh God, I don't want to drink. Like I'd made it to a certain point in the day. I hadn't had anything to drink. And I remember thinking, I don't want to drink. I'm so tired. I feel so bad. And I remember looking in my little hovel of a kitchen and thinking, I have to drink. And I remember that very clear realization, I have to drink. And I put the drink in and this is so gross, Diet Dr. Pepper and whiskey. And I remember drinking that and holding my nose because I knew I would throw up if I didn't hold my nose. And I drank it because I had to drink. And a few days later, my sister's husband died of alcoholism, and he was 42. Which I'm older than that now, and I'm like, but at the time I remember thinking, I'm not that much younger than him. 42 is not very old. And, the book talks about an alcoholic death, and it says, to die an alcoholic death, or to live a spiritual life or to be condemned to an alcoholic death, what's our choice to be? And the joke is, right, only an alcoholic would be like, how bad is an alcoholic death? It's really bad. An alcoholic death is really bad. He had a ruptured ulcer in his stomach. And it's the kind of death where you're dying. And it's scary. And it's painful. And that made a huge impression on me because I thought, I relate to how that man drinks. I admired the way that man drank. And 2 weeks later, I destroyed another relationship, and it was because of my drinking. I'm a fairly nice person today, and I was a fairly nice person back then, but when I would drink, I would say that thing that you're never supposed to say to your partner. You know it. If you know your partner, you know the thing, whatever the thing is. And I would say it, and I would say it. I have a journalism degree. I speak the words well, and I speak the mean words really well, and I would destroy the person. And so I torpedoed another relationship. And then within a couple of days, I noticed I had already been getting really sick when I drank, physically sick, and I didn't know what was going on. And then it just quit working. Like the main thing that alcohol had done for me at that point was to make this shut up. And it quit doing that. And so, my sister's husband was dead, this relationship was gone, and I couldn't get my head to shut up anymore. And, I had screwed over a lot of people in my drinking, and I felt kind of bad about it, but I drank more. But I had 2 cats, and I loved these cats. And I made a decision one night at the beer barn there on Live Oak and Skillman. That's my moment of clarity place. I was in the beer cooler, and I had come out with some tall boys and a bottle of white wine, because I was keeping it classy that night. And I went over to the cat food, and I had a thought, I really don't have enough money for all of this. And I knew my cats needed to eat. They hadn't eaten for about a day and a half. I'd been giving them butter, just things in the house. I discovered cats don't like powdered creamer, so I was really trying everything. But I knew my cats were hungry, and I made the decision that they could just be hungry. And I decided I was going to buy the alcohol. And in that moment, I swear it was like, New York Broadway lights, you are an alcoholic. I mean, it was to my core in that moment. I knew, whoa, only an alcoholic would make this decision. And so I called my friend Dave, and I said, Dave, I think I have a problem with alcohol. And he was like, who is this? And he, finally, when he figured out who I was, he said, God, I'm honored you would call me. And then I thought, did you hear me? Like, I just told you this very shameful thing, I'm an alcoholic. And he said, do you think you can not drink? This was a Saturday night. You think you can not drink tonight? And I was like, hell no. I'm going to drink tonight. Because he said he would take me to Cornerstone. He would take me to an AA meeting the next night. And what I knew from my brother and sister was they went to NA. And I was like, NA, AA, CA, OA, SLA, like alphabet soup, 12 steps. And I knew, I was like, well, you go to one of those alphabet soup groups, you never drink again. So I was like, well, I'm never drinking again tomorrow, so I am going to hit it tonight. And I went home without the cat food, but I went home and it was, I could not get drunk, and I realized I was never going to drink again. And the book talks about a jumping off point that when I read it later, I recognized, where it says, you will realize basically with 100% certainty, you must drink. And with equal certainty, you must not drink. And it says, many will wish for the end. And I did try that night to take my life, because I thought, I can't do this. I can't make this decision. But, I woke up in the morning and I went to brunch with friends, because I needed to look good. I didn't want anyone to worry about me. And he picked me up at like 5:30 for a Cornerstone meeting. And I sat and cried in that meeting. I threw up in every trash can at Cornerstone because I was so hungover. And I didn't realize that I kind of went through a mild case of the DTs, which I only figured out when I described to a doctor several years later about how I started running a high fever and shaking. And he was like, oh yeah, people like you should go to detox first. And so that's my message I like to carry everywhere is it's good to go to detox as an alcoholic. So I did not go to detox though. And I got really lucky that first night. Dave had called some people, and I sat next to some blonde chick, some Dallas chick, who was pretty bossy. And when they held up that silver coin and said something about, for me it was blah, 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 but an outward symbol of an inward desire to try our way of life for one 24-hour period. Really, no one should say that, because no one who has under 24 hours sober has any idea what we're talking about. But she elbowed me and she said, go get that. So I got a desire chip on April 6th at a Sunday night meeting, and they took me out to dinner afterward, and this guy Tom found a second edition big book in the trunk of his car, and he gave it to me. And that sponsor said, I want you to go home tonight. I want you to take a Benadryl, because it might help you stop throwing up, and go to bed. And then I want you to call me in the morning. I go to work at 8, so call before then. I did that. And in the morning, I called her, freaking out, still so sick. I was having trouble reading when I was coming off of alcohol, because it was like my eyes were waving. And I talked to her 2 to 3 times a day. I went to Cornerstone at noon and 7:30. And they just kept saying, come, sit down, sit here, drink some coffee, go to the bathroom if you have to throw up. Get there. And people kept being so nice to me. And it was really uncomfortable. I couldn't understand why y'all were being so nice to me. I didn't have anything to offer. And a couple days after that, on Thursday night, my sponsor said, you know, we're going to take a meeting up to, at the time it was called Karen Treatment Center. It's up in Princeton. And she said, you're going to come with us. Like I said, she was really bossy. And I was embarrassed. I said, I'm not going to a treatment center. I'm like 3 days sober. I have nothing. And she said, you know, you have 3 days sober. To the person who has 2 days sober, you have something to offer. Get in the car. So I got in the car. And I remember that night very clearly because there was a 16-year-old in the rehab, and he was celebrating his birthday. And I was very impressed that a 16-year-old was in rehab. But I didn't realize at the time that you know, parents might have an influence on that. But I found out on Friday that he had actually taken his life that night. And it was the first time, you know, after what I had tried and then hearing this about this young man, realizing that this was really serious, that this wasn't just a social club, that this wasn't just nice people hanging out drinking coffee, that this really could be my life. And I had made a little deal with myself, you know, when I came in, I knew I was messed up. And I figured I would give it 90 days because I heard multiple people say that thing about 90 meetings in 90 days. And so I thought, I'm going to try it for 90 days. And if this stinks, I'm out of here and I have more money for drinking. But for 90 days, I'm going to do everything this bossy sponsor tells me to do. And I did. And I had a sponsor who worked straight out of the big book in the 12 and 12. Immediately, she had me reading from page 1. I mean, not even page 1, the cover page. We were reading how it says, how, you know, the story of how many hundreds or thousands of men and women have recovered. And she's like, what does that mean? Recovered versus recovering. And I wanted to be like, I don't know, lady, I can't read yet. But, I mean, she read it for me. When I couldn't read the doctor's opinion, she read it to me over the phone, in person. I hadn't taken a shower without a beer in the corner. I bought a holder for beer and cigarettes in my shower. I had to have her talk me through bathing without alcohol. I had a foam super big gulp cup that always had beer in it because I couldn't go to Fiesta. I couldn't go to Target without alcohol. She talked me through all of this. She talked me through, you know, learning how to spend money responsibly. I started shoplifting a week into sobriety because I was so uncomfortable. And I told her this, and she was like, you have to stop. We're not even at your 9th step yet. You can't add things to it yet. And I was like, okay. You know, and it was this super enmeshed relationship that was exactly what I needed at the time because I was non-functional when I got sober. And she held my hand. She was tough. She was bossy and unpleasant and also very funny. You know, I did my 9th step with her with over 300 resentments. And we just chain smoked cigarettes and drank bubbly water for 2 days, you know, and went over all of this. And I look back now and I'm like, God, I was so crazy when I got sober. Just like my hair was on fire all the time. You know, I picked up a boyfriend at 60 days off the back row because that's the best place to get a boyfriend from. You know, moved in like 2 months later. And just all the time, crisis and drama. And yet, this incredible magic of coming in here, and I'd be driving and I'd be like, I'm sober. And I'd be taking a shower and I'd be like, I'm sober. You know, I'd be going out to dinner and I'd be like, I'm sober. It was amazing. I mean, I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be like, I'm sober. I'm not hungover. This is amazing. And AA to me still has that quality because I was talking to my husband earlier this evening about sobriety, and he's a normie. His dad died of alcoholism, and his dad was the drinker who just sits in a chair and is, you know, checked out. Like, he was just not there. And so his idea of alcoholism is just basically an empty chair. And I was trying to explain to him how in AA, people like that, people like me, suddenly we are alive again and we are inhabiting our bodies and living in life. Because I think so much of what I was doing was just sort of the robot in the shell, just moving through life. And I think the greatest gift that I've gotten in sobriety isn't about the outward stuff anymore. I mean, I love my scarf and, I'm happy about my boots and I'm happy, I'm married. I can't believe that happened. I have a child, but that's not the stuff that I think is really the most amazing about sobriety. It's at that place in me that was so just decimated by life, has life today. And today I have that thing that I would call my inner okayness. Because there's more, it's more than happy. Happy, sad, all the feelings, they're all over the place. And, when you come to AA, you feel better. Like you feel everything better. And today it's a real honor to be able to do that because, my dad is dying. And I spent yesterday with him. He has a metastatic breast cancer and is dying and Parkinson's, and is dying it's pretty brutal. And I just had the thought, when I was with him, my son was with me. They had forgotten we were coming over, and my dad was having a really bad day. And I asked my son on the way home, I said, does it scare you to see Grandpa like that? And he said, yeah, it does. I don't even want to look at him. I said, I understand that. I said, sometimes I think when I look at Grandpa and I see how sick he is, I try to imagine putting on glasses. And I like to think of the lens being like the lens of love. And I can see past Grandpa's broken body, and I can see his spirit now. And I was like, wow, where'd that come from? And then he said, what does that look like? I said, it's radiant. And my thought after that was, what if I could see everybody like that? Because something I've learned in here is that far beyond our ninth step, far beyond the resentments, far beyond the things we've done in our past, because I'm yet to meet anyone in this program that doesn't have a story about their past, and some things. In fact, I've yet to meet another human who doesn't have things in their life that they've done that bring them sadness or shame or make them feel bad. And I think about the opportunities that I have in a place like this to find the redemption, to find that part of me again that wants life, that part of me that looks for life, and to see that in you as well. And I feel honored today that I can be with my dad sober, because there were a lot of years when I stole from him. Mostly I stole his peace of mind. He worried about me. He heard me put down my bag and heard bottles of wine clinking around in there. And I feel like that's the kind of stuff that's super heavy in life, to have to deal with, but also is a place that is very beautiful, that I get to be there today. I get to help walk my son through this experience. I get to walk through it myself, and I get to participate in life. And for someone like me, I still to this day cannot believe it. I can't believe I don't have something in the corner of my shower for beer and cigarettes. I can't believe I've been married to one person for like 7 years or something. It's a really long time for someone like me. And so I know it's against traditions, but if I had my way some days, I would put on a sandwich board and walk around, outside of bars with I don't know what it would say. I'm sure I could wordsmith something, but I feel like there's so many people I know in my family and in my friend group, and I wish I could just give this to them. But, that's not how this works. There's no betting on who's going to get sobriety and who's not. You just don't know, that'd be a really bad gamble, because some of the people that have come in that I think sound the best and make the most sense are the ones I never hear from again. I used to sponsor women from, Nexus. And, they're required to have a sponsor. So I would have sponsee after sponsee after sponsee. Like, I know Bill's story so well because I would go every week and I would read Bill's story the first week. We'd read Doctor's Opinion, Bill's story, read through the book. And so those first couple of chapters, but then I'd never hear from these women again. And I've always wondered, what happens to us? And I kind of know the answer. I know the answer because I have paid attention to the people that come in here and the people that go out, and this is unfortunately my funeral dress. I can dress it up tonight, but it's AA is a place where there's some sad things that happen. But mostly I just think about the joy of being able to be here, and I'm just so pleased and honored to be here with you tonight and to be able to share my experience about alcoholism and about recovery from it. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and thank you.